This is Hoops Forum, a production of Radius Athletics and a quick timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and I'm joined once again this week by my co-host, Randy Sherman. Before we get going, thanks to our sponsors over at 323 Sports. Summer camp season is just around the corner, and right now 323 Sports has a special offer for camp t-shirts. You can find out more about those at www.323sports.com, or you can contact a sales rep, sales@323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your summer camp program. As we enter here the late spring and early summer months, I'm sure a lot of coaches will be evaluating this past season and looking forward to improving themselves and their program in the offseason. So today, just kind of talking through that process a little bit, thinking about things maybe that we should consider and maybe also some things to avoid. Randy, I'll go ahead and let you kind of kick things off with this.
Yeah.
Just from like a broad perspective, what do you feel are the areas that a coach should really be looking at?
Well, I would say in my work with coaches, what I try to do is help them sort of going into the season, think about some goals, some attainable, but realistic, attainable, smart goals. And that's one thing. Two, sort of create a game model for how we're going to play and what our points of emphasis are in all the phases of play. So I would answer your question by when we're at this part of the calendar where we're looking backward to evaluate, that would be where I would start. Would be, let's compare the plan when we left on the journey to what it looked like when the journey ended, and see how closely they matched. Did we follow our game model closely? Is there evidence that we're closer to playing this sort of idealistic way that we created to begin with? So I would say one thing to evaluate would be sort of your performance relative to your game model and desired performance for the season. Another area might be statistics. Those are, that's probably why we keep them, right? That's probably why we keep them, and even some just sort of semi-advanced statistics, or to keep them is to evaluate. They're sort of our grade, a numerical, tangible thing to sort of say, okay, this is what great teams look like, or great performances look like, and this was ours, or we exceeded it or fell a little bit short in these areas, and that would help you prioritize going forward.
I think to the first point about kind of what you had planned, I think that presupposes that you had something planned at the beginning. Like I wanted our team to look like this at the end, which that may be something for next season. I don't know that necessarily a lot of coaches, maybe younger coaches, kind of just are thinking early on, like, what can I do to help this team win, and the individual players to improve. And the more broad your goals are there, I think those are kind of harder to measure.
Yeah.
I've noticed as I've gotten older, like my goals have gotten more specific, which has allowed you then to your point at the end, even when it comes to data. We've talked extensively about the 4 factors. I know what data I'm looking at to what actually matters to our program, and I can judge appropriately and make adjustments appropriately, rather than just having like this huge chunk of information that I kind of just am all over the place. And what needs to improve? I don't know. I think this would probably improve, type of thing. So this is probably the end of your plan. The planning process has happened, the games have happened, and now it's time to evaluate. But if you don't have a plan at the beginning, probably this evaluation process may not necessarily do a lot of good for your program right now, maybe.
Right. I sure hope that we're beginning with a plan.
Yeah.
So we can sort of have steps that we accomplish along the way, and like instead of just, what I don't like maybe is letting wins and loss record be our only evaluation metric, right? Like, well, we didn't win more games than we lost, or we didn't make to the state semifinals, or we didn't win state or nationals or the professional league championship. So therefore I categorically declare this season a failure. Well, I don't know that that's a very good way of evaluating your performance as a coach, because there's so many more inputs that go into sort of just the end result than just your coaching, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I see a lot of coaches talking about, and podcasts, and I even had one here recently about like player evaluations, and to what we've been talking about would probably be more of like program evaluations as a whole.
Yeah.
Do you think there's enough evaluation of coaching staffs being done?
Well, probably not. I would say that, that's part of your boss's job, an athletic director or something like that, that's one of, I remember being evaluated by athletic directors and principals and things like that were in charge of evaluating your performance relative to their expectations of the program. So as far as evaluating, like, maybe, are you asking about like a head coach evaluating his staff, or someone? Probably not enough. Like who evaluates us? Who evaluates us? Who, we could take feedback from players. We could take peer feedback. We could take, a head coach could elicit feedback from their assistant coaching staff, and vice versa. But and then we also could get feedback from our athletic director, or whoever's in charge of say evaluating our coaching performance. But yeah, there's probably not good, accurate, sound, well thought out evaluation of performances. That there's probably some room for improvement there.
Yeah, we've taken player evaluations and just simply asked them things like, what are some things I've heard a lot of coaches doing, like start, stop, continue. What are some things we need to do?
Yeah, that's a good way.
I've also put it in the place of, if you were the head coach, what would you do differently? Both of those can be eye-opening. Sometimes I think the players, they don't necessarily have the whole context of everything, so I don't necessarily take everything that they say as being something that needs to be changed, but it does at least give you some other perspective. I think what's been helpful for our staff, the head coach has been very willing to ask, like, what kind of things do you feel like need to change? But even goes beyond that to, like, what are you comfortable with? What are some areas that you're looking to improve in? That's been huge for me. And as an assistant coach, is that knowing that my head coach is wanting me to grow and develop, and that's even changed like our roles and responsibilities. He's given me different responsibilities to help me grow in those areas. And I think, like, over the course of the last 5 years that he and I have been together, I think I've become better as a coach, but it's both of us have become more effective because there was that open communication and helping each other grow in the annual evaluations. If you want to just talk about just conversations about how can we improve individually and then also as a group. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a sit down formal interview or anything like that. But I think just having those conversations can help your staff get stronger. And then you see the benefits for the program as well.
Yeah.
So those are just a few.
I think an important question I would ask would be, is what we're teaching making it to the court on game night? That, as simple as that. Like, let's go back and watch performances based on that one question. Are the things we're teaching, maybe better said, are the things we are teaching making it to the court on game night? One, like, can I look at a possession defensively, offensively, or the transition phases between and say, I'm seeing video, clear evidence of the things we're teaching making it to the court on game night? I don't know that there's a better way to evaluate our coaching performance than that. And then if they are, let's take it the next step. If they are making it to the game night, are those tactics, strategies, etc., proving to be effective? And if they're not, where's the gap? And that could help us sort of chart what's going to go forward. And I think that might be a good way to help evaluate a staff, right? So like if you were my assistant and I said, okay, Tony, you're in charge of guard play, and during our positional breakdowns where I've got the bigs, you got the smalls, and you're teaching, footwork or whatever, that could be a way the head coach, could evaluate an assistant by like, okay, I know Tony's teaching this pivot foot, this sort of jump stop, or our footwork into a catch, into a shot looks like this, and I'm seeing video evidence of that. I'm seeing a player who used to didn't do those things, consistently, now doing them more consistently or doing them all the time, right? So what better feedback would I need to know that my assistant's doing an effective job if there's transference to the game?
Yeah, that's good. Do you feel like there's maybe a biggest mistake or most common mistake or just mistakes when it comes to the evaluation for a coach looking at his program?
Yeah, I do. I think one is our own inaccuracy and our own inability to sort of accurately place what good or exemplary looks like for this program. Again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about. In a world where the sports world, where it's like just win, baby, championship or bust, then we have an easy way to say, well, we weren't successful because we didn't win our conference or whatever, or league or championship or whatever. So I don't know that's a great way to do it, because I would say the biggest mistake and the biggest shortcoming I've seen in coaches is sort of this inability to sort of accurately place what was the ceiling for this team, what would have been a good season for this team, and so we're already we're already going to misevaluate if we've sort of if we look at every single team that we've ever coached, or if we look at every single job as that's just they're one coach away from a national championship. Like, no, like not all jobs, not all coaching situations have the same ceiling. Not all teams have the same ceiling. Like for one team, a 500 record might be like that coach did a tremendous job. Like this they have not enough talent. Maybe they exceeded their talent level because of a wonderful job that the coaching staff did. But for another team, a 500 record might be underachievement. So the biggest mistake I've seen is where as coaches, we really lack the bias-free, emotion-free ability to accurately place our team on the competitive ladder. Therefore, we're bound to misevaluate because we don't really know what we can't really. It feels wrong, if you will, to say like, man, a good season for us would be 16 and 15. Right? That feels bad. Like that feels like, you mean you're okay with losing 15 games? Like, yeah. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. And obviously, like, I'm not like trying to meet my 15 loss quota or something. I want to exceed that, but like, we got to be able to look at the team in front of us and know what that ceiling would be and where we are on the competitive scale.
Yeah, I feel like now would be a good time too to put a plug in for what we did about a year ago this time, which was go through the series on the different biases, where you now have an opportunity to kind of look at things realistically, to your point, and did I make knee-jerk reactions to improve upon a season that was a 14-14 season, and I thought it could get to 18 and whatever 14.
Yeah.
Versus realistic. What are the realistic expectations? Did I make some knee-jerk reactions because of some biases that I had in my coaching? And I do think it's important for us to come back to the source, which in our case is us as coaches. Like, how did we do? And just us going through that series kind of revealed to me a lot of the biases pop up throughout the season. And I think you get a better perspective once things slow down and now the season's over and you're actually kind of able to look back with the perspective of the whole year in mind.
Yeah. Well, the one bias in specific that applies to what we're talking about in what you asked of my opinion, it's just an opinion of a mistake coaches make, is the optimism bias, meaning we tend, meaning human beings, not just coaches or me or you, but all human beings there's an optimism bias in that we believe things will turn out sort of better than they possibly may, right? Like, so I know I've mentioned this before, but I did an exercise with the coaches I work with once where in the preseason, I asked them to just simply predict your record this coming year. And then after the season, we looked back on it and they were awful at it. And to the optimistic side, meaning I had guys giving themselves 10 more wins than they actually got, right? Mm-hmm. And that's off by quite a lot, not just a little, like that's a egregious miscalculation of your team's ability, right? So we have this bias toward optimism, especially when we see ourselves as the one in charge, as the agent of change. Like, well, I can get us there, or something like that. We're probably better able to look at, say, like a district opponent or a conference opponent and assess what they'll do more accurately than what we'll do. Mm-hmm. Like I could probably say, well, that team down the road, they're probably going to go about, 19 wins and 8 losses and be plus or minus pretty close, right? But like what I found and what optimism bias would suggest is I'm probably going to miss on my own to the positive side. Mm-hmm. So I would say let's understand where we are in our sort of our macro calendar as a program. Like if we've improved and we went from awful to bad to average, like, if we expect to make a jump from average to elite and skip the sort of good or real good phase, like what happened to make me think that? Like, did I recruit a 6'11" center? Did I sign an All-American? Did what happened? Because if nothing like sudden, some big jolt, like, then the progress is probably going to remain incremental.
Mm-hmm. Throughout the summer, coaches are now like looking for potential opportunities to improve themselves through books. And you've mentioned several books through the course of the season, but I know just with the busyness, probably most didn't get an opportunity to read those. Is there anything maybe that you mentioned before or that you've read that you think would help with even some of the stuff that we've talked about today?
Yeah, sure. I would begin by sort of like maybe looking at as we want to acquire skills as coaches that in coaching, what skills go into coaching are sort of mostly soft skills, right? Like it's not like you're a carpenter and you need to get better with your hammer, saws or whatever. You can tell I'm not a carpenter, but like you have to get better communication, more intangible type skills that there's really, it's not as cut and dry. One skill that I would say that I have found that I think I've helped coaches with is just becoming a better thinker, like thinking like a grown up and not like a fan, not like a child, but like recognize holes in my thinking, things like that. So some good books for that, I would say Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke is a good one. She's a former poker on the Poker Star Tour. And she's also highly educated in behavioral psychology and things like that. And that helped her in the poker world to sort of read the table and things like that, and helped her sort of and to clean up her card playing progress required her be a cleaner thinker, free of emotion, and sort of like really think in terms of probabilities and things like that. So that's one. Another one would be another book that I would recommend would be called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who's sort of the godfather, if you will, of sort of like decision, behavioral economics and decision and analysis. Let's call it that. So those would be two. I also think that I would want to do some reading on organization, on sort of efficiency, and on like how to sort of like prioritize. And a good book that I read on that is called The Checklist Manifesto, where it's sort of it's a book that sort of like sings the praises, if you will, of making checklists of your processes and following that checklist as sort of like an error prevention tool.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought there was some good applications to coaching in that book that could help you make a game model, that could help you plan a workout, that like in every workout we want to hit this and this, and like it helps me refer back to these checklists to say, okay, did I include an activity that speaks to this? Like they often reference in that book surgeons, pilots, things like that before takeoff, like even in they to reduce accidents and malpractice and things like that, is like every single time we have to refer back to this checklist. Did I check this gauge, this safety procedure? So I thought that would be a good one too.
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about like from the coaching perspective, X's and O's type of thing. I would say spend more time on the teaching component of it, and we've referenced a few times Doug Lemov's A Coach's Guide to Teaching.
Mm-hmm.
That will probably improve your on-court teaching have more effect than like the going out and getting a few more X's and O's, which to your point that you've mentioned before, you probably have enough X's and O's to win the games that you need to anyway. So I hope coaches are spending time kind of thinking the offseason more about that kind of thing than they are about a new inbounds play that's going to win them a game. And you talked a little bit about that this week on your Beyond the Scoreboard newsletter that you sent out. We appreciate Sideline Interactive and their support of Hoops Forum. They're the leading manufacturers and scoreboards and scorers tables for high schools and colleges around the country. Your Beyond the Scoreboard newsletter this week, specifically, you kind of put on the Dr. Randy Sherman the garb and broke some things down there on that one.
Yeah, it kind of just spawned from a conversation I had with a group of coaches I help, and I guess the whole debate that I was made aware of going on was something about what's good X's and O's. That what gets called, like they run some good X's and O's, or that team runs some good stuff. And I just sort of asked the question, like, who gets to decide what's good and what's bad? And are we sure that like what we're saying that I'm declaring they run good X's and O's, is that just me really saying I like the X's and O's that they run, and not that they're somehow right or superior to all the other, you know what I mean? So one of the things that conversation led to, like, well, then how would you define what are good X's and O's? And my attempt at doing it was to sort of refer to the medical field and say that, well, I want to do something as simple and risk and error free as possible that meets the goal, and that would be to generate a good shot. So if we don't need 57 handoffs and back screens before we take a shot, and we can just kind of come down, penetrate, and kick, I'd rather do the latter, because there's less room for someone to forget the play, a handoff in one of the passes, or an error in one of the handoffs or passes or cuts or something that we mess up with. So like, much like a doctor who prescribes a minimum effective dose, they give you 50 milligrams when they could give you 500, I suppose. But if like all you need is 50 milligrams, that's all they prescribe. They don't over prescribe. So I do feel like what sometimes gets called good X's and O's are, wow, look how but like, then watch the shot. Like, what happened? Like, then, okay, a guy came off a screen and got, like, at the end of when the possession terminated, a guy came off the end of the screen and got a shot. Well, couldn't we just do that? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
So And I know that as the stakes raise and the competition raises, sometimes we can't be so maybe simple, but let's find out. Like let's try to be, and then if we need to be more intricate in order to accomplish the mission of getting a good shot, then let's do that. But like on an as needed basis, rather than like, oh, look at all this cool stuff, I'm going to try this. Like, make sure that if there's a more simple way, I'm all for it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
And
what it was about.
this could be its own episode. I think this kind of starts moving into the what I hear a lot of times where people don't like NBA basketball, they prefer college basketball, and when it comes down to it, it's really I just prefer it. I think it's better than the NBA basketball or
Yeah, I
the
like
other
it
way
more.
around.
I
Right.
like it more.
I like it more. Right.
That's
At
it.
the end of the day, but I do think I do feel like there are some. They probably could explain it a little bit better. How effective are those X's and O's? And we've talked about effective X's and O's and what are you actually trying to create out of this? I think at the end of the day, we call somebody, they say they have a great, they're great X's and O's if you end up with like a wide open shot. And how rare that actually happens over the course of a game, let alone like, you can't come down every play and end up with a wide open shot. So anyways, yeah, it was good. I enjoyed reading that.
Thank you.
And you can subscribe to that. Go to radiusathletics.com and sign up there on the page. You got several different options that Randy has there for coaches, and I'd encourage them to go check that out if you can, if you haven't already, and also be sure to follow him at Radius Athletics on Twitter. Appreciate all of you who joined us this week. If you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and watch or listen. You can watch the full episode on YouTube. Just simply search Radius Athletics, or you can listen to it in podcast form by searching A Quick Timeout. You'll find the audio version of the show there. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. We'll talk to you again next week on Hoops Forum.